Hello and welcome everyone to the first of our 2021 summer webinar and open house series, The Abundance of Nutrients in Plant Foods. In this presentation, we'll look at where you can get your calcium and vitamin D on a plant-based diet rich in fruits and vegetables. And in July and August, we'll be covering different important nutrients as well. Over the last 2 years, the theme of our summer webinar series was Transcending What's Trending, where we looked at issues like ketogenic diets, intermittent fasting, and how our immune system works in relationship to a whole food plant-based approach. For example, when you're not over-consuming calories, implementing one of the intermittent fasting strategies may not be necessary because you don't need to compensate for over-consuming that you're not doing. You won't be looking towards a ketogenic diet because you're already at a healthy weight. You won't have to overly concern yourself with your microbiome because you're already eating a very high fiber diet, including lots of prebiotic fiber that feeds healthy bacteria in your gut and allows for a healthy microbiome. Not that these subjects aren't fascinating and fun to study, we think they are, but they oftentimes reinforce the benefits of what we're already doing when you're really dialed into the healthiest approach to whole food plant-based nutrition. There is just so much synergy here, no matter what is trending or is not trending at the time. Now, where to obtain key nutrients on plant-based diets and how those nutrients work in the body seems to be perpetually trending. So that's what we're covering in our summer series this year. For those of you who don't know us yet, I'm Dr. Rick Dina, and you'll be hearing from Dr. Karen Dina in a few minutes. We're both chiropractic physicians who have been on the whole food plant-based path for 34 and 33 years each, respectively. Essentially, all of our adult lives having gotten started in late adolescence, and we're board certified and licensed in the state of California. We've hosted plant-based summits for the past 6 years, where we interviewed successful, healthy, long-term raw vegan educators and plant-based doctors to share with you how you can be successful on this path over the long term as well. We're also the authors of the Raw Food Nutrition Handbook, which you can see down here in the bottom right, as well as banners from our first 5 years of summits. This year in 2021, we had our Energy Reset Summit, where we branched out a bit further and had more of our plant-based doctor colleagues join us while still having many raw food educators as well. And there we are, your hosts. We're the developers and instructors of the Mastering Raw Food Nutrition online and interactive plant-based curriculum that we're going into our 6th year teaching, and also the developers and instructors of the precursor to that course, the Science of Raw Food Nutrition series of classes that we taught for 10 years live in person. For those of you interested, we'll share more about our Mastering Raw Food Nutrition plant-based curriculum later on in this webinar. Now, from this and from speaking and teaching at many conferences and events over the years, over the decades actually, we've become known for our thoroughness and our scientific accuracy. That is very, very important to us. Number 2, our ability to make complex subjects easy to understand. We make sure that you see the big picture of each topic and then how all the details fit into context so everything makes sense. We do this for each topic and to see how all the topics fit into the big picture to see a cohesive whole. Number 3, we're known for our encouraging approach that takes unnecessary hurdles out of people's way. I mean, it's tough out there today. No matter what you do, someone's there to tell you why it's bad for you. We hear things like starches aren't healthy, cooked food is poison, juices aren't healthy, smoothies are junk food. You can't get important nutrients like beta-carotene and lycopene from eating raw foods. There's no such thing as B12 deficiency, and all sorts of other myths. Some people even say lettuce is bad for you. But we won't tell you just that anything goes, because that's not accurate and doesn't get you the best results. But we'll put everything into context based on real science and the real life experience of ourselves, our students, our patients, and other plant-based doctors and their patients, and many people we've known in this movement over the decades. This way, you'll understand what's behind the claims and have confidence knowing that you're doing the right thing. We've also been told that we're very authentic, straightforward, and no nonsense, that we tell it like it is. We believe that when you're able to determine and then share what's most accurate about any topic, in this case plant-based nutrition, the results simply speak for themselves. And there's so much good news there. All you have to do is tell the truth. Now, I want to mention that sometimes people get concerned when they hear the term raw food. They think it means things like living on wheatgrass juice and sprouts, or eating an exclusively fruit diet while excluding vegetables, or something else that just sounds way too extreme. What we're really about is studying nutrition from an evidence-based, scientific, results-oriented perspective. And with this approach, it becomes clear pretty quickly that de-emphasizing animal foods and processed foods and instead focusing on whole natural plant foods has a huge array of synergistic benefits. Now, once you get into that realm and continue researching, investigating, and working with people, it starts to become clear that including an abundance of fresh fruits and vegetables in your diet is additionally advantageous for so many reasons. As you'll hear with Dr. Karen's history of fatigue, going plant-based helped enough to give her hope, but then going mostly raw really made the difference, and without exaggerating, really gave her life back and quite a bit more. You can sum up our approach by whole food, all plant, based on fruits and vegetables. Now again, within that framework, we are very inclusive and affirming, while at the same time encouraging people to derive as much of their diets from fresh fruits and vegetables as they can lovingly and comfortably enjoy. We're not going to make anyone wrong, though, for eating brown rice or chickpeas or steamed kale or broccoli. So no matter where you are on this path, if heading toward this approach sounds reasonable and desirable to you, better yet, exciting to you, that's great. Anywhere from just getting started to having been there yourself for many years and wanting further education and refinement that many of our students take advantage of. Before we continue, we'd like to let you know that the information and opinions expressed by us in this webinar are not intended to be used as medical advice and should not be used to diagnose or treat any medical condition or as a substitute for individualized health care. This webinar is presented with the understanding that we are not liable for misconception, misuse, or adverse effects resulting from its use. Any type of dietary change, nutritional therapy, or fasting should always be undertaken with the supervision of a qualified healthcare practitioner. Now, it's possible we may be those practitioners for you, but we want to make it very clear that watching this webinar does not establish a doctor-patient relationship. So let's take a look here. Each of our webinars this year and including in the past years have the same basic format. We start with a basic introduction, which we're just about covered with now. Then we go on to our backgrounds, and each year we have the same background. So in other words, for our 3 webinars in 2019, our backgrounds were each the same. For our webinars in 2018, the backgrounds were all the same. But the 18 webinars and the 19 webinars are different. Same thing for our class information at the end. That's the same for each webinar within the same year, but they are different from year to year. And then in the middle, we have different educational content for every webinar. If you go back and watch some of the previous ones, you'll see some of the same topics, and for some of them there's some overlap, but there's also some differences each time also. So our webinars are very, very educational. And then we'll tell you about our curriculum at the end. And for those of you here live, we have a live question and answer session, but it's not on the recording. So now that we've got the introduction covered, we'll move on to a few minutes of Dr. Karen's background.
I found raw food at a time when I was experiencing notable fatigue for which there was apparently no answer. I was in college at the time and I was sleeping 10, 12, and sometimes even more hours per night, and still waking up non-refreshed. I saw 3 medical professionals, and after multiple lab tests and evaluations, I had a diagnosis: fatigue of unknown origin. They had a whole list of everything that I didn't have, but could not pinpoint the source of my fatigue. I asked every single one of them if my fatigue may have had anything to do with my college diet and lifestyle. They all emphatically said no. Things really started to change, however, when a friend gave me a copy of a book that discussed vegan diets and the connection between diet and health. I also learned about the connections between diet and the environment and the way animals are treated. And with all these compelling arguments, I was open to giving this approach a try, and I became vegan. In addition to feeling good about eating compassionately and leaving a lighter footprint on the earth, I was so excited to find that my fatigue actually started to improve, despite what the so-called experts, in this case the medical professionals, said would happen. This personal experience opened the door to my thinking that diet really could make a difference in health and left me open to exploring other opportunities. When I learned about and implemented a raw food diet, my energy soared far beyond the impressive improvements that I experienced by eating vegan. Long story short, my fatigue vanished, along with a variety of other symptoms that I'd had for years, and I had more energy than I knew what to do with. I could not remember a time when I felt better. I started to look healthier and I slept better. I enjoyed exercising and my digestion improved. I was so inspired by the health results I was experiencing that I felt compelled to learn more about the inner workings of the human body, nutrition, and the diet-health connection. I really wanted to immerse myself in learning as much as I could, so I earned a second undergraduate degree in biology and then received doctorate-level education in naturopathic medicine and chiropractic, which helped me to put everything that I observed into perspective, and on a much deeper level. Over the years, I've refined and revised my approach to raw food and tailored it to my individual needs. And we can show you how to do this too. Next, Dr. Rick will share with you a bit about his background and experience with raw food and plant-based nutrition. So take it away, Dr. Rick.
Thank you, Dr. Karen, and hello again, everyone. In this webinar, I'll share a succinct overview of my background and history with plant-based nutrition. And if you'd like more detail and additional information, you can take a look at one of our 2018 or 2019 webinars. So growing up was the typical American food, and for the most part I was healthy, but I had a major issue every spring and a little bit in the fall with hay fever type seasonal allergy issues. I had a runny nose, itchy, watery eyes. I would feel totally drained of energy. Some days I actually had to miss school or work because of it, and I missed a whole year of playing Little League Baseball because they'd cut the grass before we'd go out there and practice, and I couldn't see. It was terrible. That in and of itself isn't so bad, but what happened is the other kids that played got better that year, and I didn't. And then for tryouts the next year, I was a pretty good tennis player, so I did well enough in tryouts to get into the same league as the kids my age, but I wasn't that good because I had missed a year, and then I was the worst kid on my baseball team, and everybody knew it, so that was definitely not good. When I got to college, I kind of gained the typical freshman 15, but I already had a pretty good head start from high school. And here is a picture of me. I was exhausted because I was having a bad allergy day. I took a nap in the back of my parents' car, and my mom snapped a photo. So as you can see, I wasn't feeling my best. I was very motivated to change. So in 1986, I started making significant healthy changes to my diet, and I lost 15 pounds of fat over the summer, and I was getting some exercise, as you can see, and I was feeling so much better. It gave me so much incentive to want to keep reading and learning and implementing things. And then in 1987, I switched to a raw and vegan diet at about the same time. The term plant-based hadn't been developed yet, and that brought my health and well-being up several more notches. And I've maintained the majority of my diet from fruits and vegetables, raw foods, ever since then for the last 34 years. In 1988, I fasted for 14 days in my college dorm. Not the way I would recommend anyone does it, but one of the benefits of that was that the majority of my childhood allergy issues were gone. I was absolutely amazed at the healing power of the body. In 1988, later that spring, I actually skipped spring weekend, which was the big, there was bands and parties all over campus. I skipped that to go to a fruit and vegetable conference based on natural hygiene several hours away in Philadelphia. And my friends just thought I was nuts. But to me, to this day, I would say that was a great decision. I just wanted to keep learning as much as I could. So books, tapes, magazines, went to conferences, events. So from a professional point of view, I went to work at Hippocrates Health Institute a couple years after I finished college. I taught one of the classes there. Then I went to work for JM Marketing, and I was part of the support team that went around to different places at different hotel conference rooms in the United States and put together seminars about the benefits of fruits and vegetables and their juices, and sold juicers. And I would really enjoy it when I'd be explaining things to people who were out getting some of the juice samples, and a crowd would gather around and people are nodding their heads. And that reinforced for me that I really love teaching people about plant-based nutrition. So I wanted to keep learning. Many of the doctors involved with the National Health Association were doctors of chiropractic. That made a lot of sense to me, so I went back to chiropractic school to earn a doctorate degree. The level of depth and understanding about so many things I had learned about nutrition up until that point increased dramatically, going through especially the first couple of years with all of the science classes. Putting two and two together brought it up to a level that I'll have to say just wouldn't have been possible without that additional super intensive education. That afforded me the opportunity to earn an advanced degree, and then I went to True North Health out here in California to do an internship in medically supervised water-only fasting. Then I got to see hundreds of other people experience incredible health recoveries like I had with my allergies, but on a professional level, seeing their experience, seeing their lab work change, learning from doctors with more experience than myself, and I just got a wealth of clinical experience there. Even though I was very much in my element, after 4 years at True North, I had it. Not with True North, but with it, I had been in back-to-back 2.5 years worth of long distance relationships. So my girlfriend at the time was attending Bastyr University in the naturopathic medical program. And I actually moved up there to support her and be with her. And as you heard previously, you may have guessed that was Dr. Karen. So it had a happy ending. And when I was at True North also, I was involved with their study on water fasting and high blood pressure that Dr. Campbell was also involved with. So in any case, when I moved up to Seattle and Dr. Karen was going to Bastyr University, now I'm going to look more professional here, I taught a class there on plant-based nutrition, and that started to develop me putting together a curriculum, which Dr. Karen has joined me for, and that was some of the early inklings of that. And by the way, also, when I was at True North, I did rounds on Sunday morning, and then after my rounds were over, I would give a presentation to the patients there. And at the time, they didn't have as much of a formalized educational program as they do now. So I took advantage of some opportunities to teach, and I taught there for about 2.5 years. Every Sunday, I started to get really good and also really enjoy presenting in front of an audience. So you heard Dr. Karen's story, and then we started developing our Science of Raw Food Nutrition curriculum in 2007 and 2008. We still had our chiropractic practice at the time, so in between patients and evenings and weekends, we were researching and putting this curriculum together. We taught that live for 10 years. Eventually, we also updated and expanded and turned that into our Mastering Raw Food Nutrition online curriculum, and that's been continuously updated as well. I have a part-time clinical practice working with people on plant-based diets. A lot of those people base their diets on fresh fruits and vegetables, and my clinical experience comes into play in our curriculum and vice versa, and it is really synergistic. Okay, so we've got the introduction covered. You heard Dr. Karen's background and my background, and now we're going to get to the educational portion of the program.
And now we'll discuss some eye-opening information about calcium and vitamin D. If you've been involved in the raw food, vegan, and plant-based community for any length of time, you've likely been asked the ever-popular, where do you get your types of questions? And we'll answer some of those questions for you today. Our first nutrient is calcium. Now, what is calcium exactly? Now, we know that it's an important nutrient, but more specifically, calcium is an element, and therefore can be found on the periodic table of the elements. Calcium is found over here on the left-hand side of the table with other alkali metals and alkaline earth metals. So if you take a look, you can see that right here calcium is located in the same period or the same column here as magnesium. And that is another alkaline mineral. And then we also have potassium right next to calcium, and that is also considered to be an alkaline mineral. So calcium can be found on the periodic table in the same area as the other alkaline earth metals. Now, in our class, Mastering Raw Food Nutrition, we talk about the fascinating research that has been done on alkaline minerals and their activity in the body. So calcium is considered to be an alkaline mineral. Calcium is the most abundant mineral in the human body, with over 99% of it found in our bones and teeth, and the other 1% found in our body tissues and blood. Now, even though only 1% is found in our tissues and blood, this 1% plays a very important role in muscle contraction and acid-alkaline balance. For example, every time you move a muscle, calcium is involved. In the bloodstream and elsewhere, calcium is involved in helping to maintain acid-alkaline balance. Calcium is also a major structural mineral, making up a significant percentage of the mineral content of our bones. The calcium DRI, or dietary reference intake, is 1,000 milligrams for women up to and including the age of 50, and men up to and including the age of 70. And then for women over 51, 1,200 milligrams, and for men over the age of 70 as well. Now, we know that some plant-based doctors say that you don't have to have this much calcium if you are plant-based, and avoid heavily acid-forming foods and substances like meat and soda. And that's a valid consideration. However, as it turns out, it's not that difficult to meet these recommendations with super healthy plant foods that have so many other benefits beyond their calcium content, as we'll talk about in just a couple minutes. Now, there's a lot of confusion about calcium and what are actually good sources on a raw or plant-based diet. Leafy greens generally have a reputation as being good sources of calcium, and the two plant families that contain the greens that are richest in calcium are the cabbage family, also known as the cruciferous vegetables, and the sunflower family. Now, on this table, we have several members of the cabbage family, and as you can see, these leafy greens in the quantities shown are notable sources of calcium. Here on top, we have kale. Kale is well known for being a good source of calcium. And then underneath it, we have bok choy, Napa cabbage, arugula, watercress, and broccoli. Really, though, the ones that are the best sources of calcium are located towards the top. So kale, bok choy, Napa cabbage, those would be some good examples of good sources of calcium in the form of leafy greens. This next table shows plants from the sunflower family. And as you can see, dandelion greens, which are actually my favorite leafy green, and romaine lettuce are notable sources of calcium when you consume them in quantity. So for example, here we've got 2 cups of dandelion greens, 206 milligrams of calcium, that's really good. And then 1 whole head of romaine lettuce. And when I say 1 whole head, I'm talking about a very large head of romaine. As you can see, what it says here is 626 grams. That will give us 207 milligrams of calcium. And then for sage greens, some people have referred to it in the past as pom-pom lettuce. You can get smaller amounts of calcium from that. And then smaller amounts of romaine will give you a decent amount of calcium as well. But what it comes down to is that if you're eating leafy greens in quantity, you can get a good amount of calcium. Now, it's important to talk about the calcium content of foods, but the real question is, how useful or accessible to the human body is the calcium found in those foods? The reason why I bring this up is because there are certain substances that we find in some foods that can bind to calcium and make it less usable by the human body. Now, oxalic acid, also known as oxalate, is one of those substances. Now, oxalate binds to calcium and certain other minerals, including iron, making them less bioavailable to our body or less useful to our body. Oxalates are found in a number of foods, but certain foods are very high in oxalate, making them not good sources of calcium. Examples would include spinach, rhubarb, Swiss chard, beet greens, and parsley. It's important to note that these are not bad foods, they're just not good sources of calcium, especially when they're raw. Now, many of these foods actually have a lot of calcium, but most of that calcium is bound to oxalate and therefore is not usable by our body. It's important to note that oxalate will not steal calcium or other minerals from your body, so that's really good to know. The reason I'm sharing this information with you is so that you can make more informed food choices. We've seen people in our clinical practice who focus on spinach as their main leafy green, and we encourage them to incorporate more of the lower oxalate greens into their diet to improve the availability of calcium, iron, and other minerals. Now here's a table showing the oxalic acid content of some of the foods that we just mentioned. And as you can see, parsley, chives, purslane, spinach, and beet greens are much higher in oxalic acid than the others that are further down on the table. Yeah, they are notably higher. It's difficult to avoid oxalic acid altogether, but if we focus our diet on lower oxalate foods, less of our dietary calcium will be bound to oxalate and therefore will be more available for use by our body for important processes. Now, what about nuts and seeds? I included some of the more popular ones here: sesame seeds, chia seeds, and almonds. As you can see, all 3 each have a notable amount of calcium in them. I also included poppy seeds here because I found them to be a surprisingly good source as well. An important thing to mention here is that nuts and seeds, while they do have calcium, also contain a substance or anti-nutrient called phytic acid, also known as phytate. Phytate binds to calcium, iron, magnesium, and zinc in the food that contains them, making these minerals less available for use in the human body. Here's a slide showing the phytate content of certain foods. And as you can see, certain nuts, seeds, and grains are the highest in phytate when compared to fruits and vegetables that are further down on this table. So wild rice, Brazil nuts, sesame seeds, almonds, walnuts, and cashews, as you can see, they're much higher in their phytate content than the foods that are further down here on the list, like the fruits and vegetables. Now, just because these foods are higher in phytate does not mean that they're bad foods. It just means that they're not going to be our best source of calcium. However, this is where soaking comes in. You've likely heard that soaking nuts and seeds can help to release enzyme inhibitors, which is true. Additionally, research has shown that soaking also inactivates phytate. In other words, when you soak your nuts and seeds, you can decrease the phytate content of these foods, allowing calcium to be more available for use by the body. In this case, soaking has a dual purpose: breaking down of enzyme inhibitors for improved digestion and an inactivation of phytate for increased calcium bioavailability. Here's how it works. Soaking activates the enzyme phytase in nuts and seeds and grains, which breaks down phytate. Sprouting will also help activate phytase. Now, soaking may also decrease phytate through the leaching of phytate into the soak water. In other words, not only does soaking inactivate phytate, it can also lead to the movement of phytate from the food into the water. In either case, more calcium is available for use by our body. The good news is that phytate can bind less tightly to calcium than to other minerals like iron and zinc. Nonetheless, soaking can make all of these minerals more available to our body. Now, you may be asking yourself, how much of a difference can soaking and sprouting make in phytate content? And this is a really good question. This table here shows the results of a study that compared the difference in iron availability between unsoaked, soaked, and sprouted sorghum grain. Now, I know that grains are controversial, so I'm not suggesting that one eat sorghum grain or any other type of grain. I'm just using this example to illustrate the difference in iron availability. As you can see, soaking and sprouting certainly appeared to make a significant difference, and other available research mirrors these findings. Now, to summarize before we move forward, we've seen that soaking and sprouting can be beneficial for helping to improve availability of minerals like calcium and iron by breaking down phytic acid. By contrast, oxalate is not affected by soaking or sprouting, and most high oxalate foods are leafy greens, which do not lend themselves to soaking and sprouting anyway, so we suggest focusing on lower oxalate greens for calcium. And then there's fruit. Now, oftentimes we hear that fruit is a good source of antioxidants and calories in the form of simple carbohydrates like fructose, but not much else. Now, I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about fruit as being a good source of minerals. So let's take a look and see for ourselves. So if we look at our table, we see that there are a variety of popular fruits in common serving sizes. So the amount that that somebody who's eating a regular type of diet might consume, and then the calcium content of those serving sizes. So we can see with standard serving sizes here that figs and Valencia oranges and deglet dates, mulberries, kiwi fruit, those are all pretty good sources of calcium. And then we can see further down on the list blackberries, sapote, raspberries, medjool dates, papaya, strawberries, and apricots also have some calcium in them as well. I think a lot of people think of fruit as not being notable sources of calcium, but what if we were to eat fruit in quantity? And when I say quantity, I'm talking about the quantity that your typical raw food enthusiast might eat. So for example, on this table we have figs, Valencia oranges, mulberries, papaya, strawberries, and apricots. So the serving size is quite a bit higher for each of these in comparison to the table that we just looked at on the previous slide. And as you can see, these fruits eaten in quantity can be significant sources of calcium. For example, 20 fresh figs, 400 milligrams of calcium. Wow, that's pretty amazing. 6 peeled Valencia oranges, almost 300 milligrams. Wow. And then mulberries here, 3 cups fresh, 164, and then the list goes on. So what it comes down to is if you're eating fruit in quantity, it can provide a significant amount of calcium, as you can see. depending on the fruit we're talking about. Now, some people really like to look at more of a per calorie assessment, so I have also included this table here so that you could take a look at that. So, a lot of the same fruits that we just talked about on the previous tables: mulberries, Valencia oranges, blackberries, kiwi fruit, figs, strawberries, etc., and so forth, all in 100 calorie amounts. And as you can see there, per 100 calories, a lot of these fruits can be significant sources of calcium as well. Overall, if we look at the highest calcium content per serving and per calorie, those fruits would include mulberries, oranges, blackberries, kiwi fruit, and figs. Now, it's very interesting to see the nutrient content of individual foods, but how much calcium do we find in foods when they're eaten together? Here we have an example of a medium-sized salad, not the huge type that Dr. Rick and I usually talk about. It's got 4 cups of romaine lettuce, 2 cups of bok choy, 1 cup of grated cucumber, 1 cup of grated carrots, and 1 cup of chopped tomato. And we have a simple dressing that's made up of 1 tablespoon of soaked sesame seeds and a tablespoon of fresh squeezed lemon juice. Now, all of these ingredients have a total of 427 milligrams of calcium. Wow! And that's fantastic considering that this is a medium-sized salad and only contains 233 calories total. That's fantastic considering that this is a medium-sized salad with only 233 calories. And when we compare that to how many calories that we eat in a day, I know for me, it's about 2,000 calories. The amount of calcium in this salad is significant. Now, here are the daily values for calcium for comparison, as we talked about earlier. As you can see, this salad provides a significant amount of the daily value for calcium. Here are some photos of the salad and the dressing. As you can see, this salad is the size of a medium mixing bowl. Now, for comparison, here is a larger salad with a few different ingredients and some additional ones as well. As you can see, the salad itself is larger than the one that we just talked about. The one we just talked about had 4 cups of romaine lettuce in it. This one has 8 cups. It also has more dark leafy greens in it. It's got 3 cups of dandelion greens as opposed to the 2 cups of bok choy in the previous salad. And then the dressing is a little bit more complicated. We have some additional ingredients in there. We've added some red bell pepper, some almonds, and some zucchini and chia seeds. And what's very interesting and not surprising about this salad is that there's 766 milligrams of calcium for 488 calories. That's fantastic. And here's a picture of the salad and the dressing. As you can see, this salad is in a large mixing bowl. It's larger than the previous salad. So depending on the amount of salad that you want to eat, you can structure that salad to be a significant source of calcium. Next, Dr. Rick is going to talk about what he eats in a day and the calcium content of that food.
Okay, folks, we have one last salad and dressing to show you, and then we'll look at an entire typical day. So I've got a different format than what you just saw with Dr. Karen. I'm going to be showing readouts from Chronometer, a popular web-based nutrient analysis program, and those of you who use it, I'm sure this looks familiar. So what I had, we'll look at the dressing first. Celery, onion, fresh lemon juice, chia seeds, walnuts, and bell pepper that was dehydrated for concentrated flavor. Blended that all up, poured it over a head of lettuce. That's a gigantic head of romaine lettuce, 3 average-sized Roma tomatoes, and 3 medium zucchinis. It made a very large bowl worth of salad. So this salad and dressing has 549 calories, and as you can already see, I got 557 milligrams of calcium. That, of course, is very solid. Now, from celery down is the dressing and the salad that you saw. What I had for breakfast that day is I ate half a cantaloupe, And then I put the rest of the cantaloupe in a blender with 2 medium bananas, 2 cups of, that was actually frozen mangoes, and 1 cup of frozen cherries, along with 4 leaves of kale. So it was good and solidly green. That was breakfast. Several hours later, 5 oranges. That was lunch. And about an hour before dinner, I consumed a head of raw cauliflower like I do most days of the year. Then I had my salad and my dressing. Now, by the way, I know some of you are thinking from looking at these salads, oh my God, that's just too much to eat. And I've noticed as I've gotten older, further into middle age here, that I can't eat quite as much as I always used to, which is one of the reasons I kind of spread my vegetables out and I have that cauliflower as an appetizer about an hour before my main salad. So if any of you think, wow, those salads are too big, you could have half of that for lunch and the other half for dinner or something like that, whatever works in your particular situation. So in this day, this entire day, there was just about 2,000 calories, and you can obviously see that fruits and vegetables dominated this daily menu, and there were about 200 calories worth of chia seeds and walnuts. 13% of the total calories came from fat. And on that diet, I got over 1,300 milligrams of calcium. Now, by the way, that head of cauliflower added 147 calories and it added 129 milligrams of calcium. And the 14 calories worth of kale actually added 102 milligrams of calcium. Part of, and this is a whole other topic, but a little pet peeve of mine is when people make this mistake that's so broad out there that raw cruciferous vegetables are bad for us. What a loss. I would have lost over 200 milligrams of calcium and a lot of other great nutrients if I subscribed to that myth. Occasionally it makes sense in isolated circumstances that are very rare, but across the board, those are excellent foods. So there we have 3 different extra large salads, one of which was part of a sample day of a fruit and vegetable dominated whole food plant-based diet that looked extremely solid for calcium content and most other nutrients as well.
Next, we'll take a look at vitamin D. One of the major functions of vitamin D is the maintenance of blood calcium levels. Essentially, vitamin D increases the absorption of calcium in our intestines. However, when there's inadequate calcium in our diet, then vitamin D will contribute to the mobilization of calcium from our skeleton for use in our normal metabolic processes. As we can see, it's very important to have adequate calcium intake. It's also important to note that vitamins D and K work together synergistically to promote bone health. Some of the research I've been looking at recently indicates that vitamin K2 essentially tells calcium where to go after it's absorbed. That's kind of the simple way to say it. But what's really fascinating about this research is that we're going to learn more about this in years to come. And to me, it shows how important nutrient synergy is for having things work well in our body. And this is just one example of that. Vitamin D also has a lot of other important functions in our body, so having a reliable source is essential. Another consideration about vitamin D is its importance for immune function. And there's been some really interesting research that has been done on this topic in the last several years. Essentially, vitamin D is important for keeping certain aspects of the immune system or the immune system response in check. We want our immune system to work well and appropriately, but we don't want it to overreact. Because when it overreacts, it can cause excess damage to our own tissues. It's good that our immune system cells produce free radicals and other substances that fight off pathogens, but too many free radicals can create damage. Now, vitamin D helps to keep the immune system from overreacting, specifically T cells and B cells. Now, in addition to modulating immune function, vitamin D also has some building functions. It's involved in the production of certain immune system cells like monocytes and macrophages. It increases the production of anti-inflammatory factors and antimicrobial proteins that can directly kill pathogens. So these are some of the things that have been studied about vitamin D, and I'm really looking forward to learning more in years to come. But this is just a sampling for you now to consider. So where do we get vitamin D? This is a really good question. We've all heard that we can get vitamin D from the sun, right? So how does this work? Essentially, what happens is that the ultraviolet B spectrum rays of the sun interact with 7-dehydrocholesterol in our skin. And that forms a substance called cholecalciferol, also known as vitamin D3. Perhaps you have heard of it. And then what happens is that vitamin D3 travels down to the liver via the bloodstream, where we get the formation of 25-hydroxy vitamin D3, which then travels down to the kidneys via the bloodstream and gives us the formation of 125-dihydroxy vitamin D3, also known as the activated form of vitamin D. Now, one thing I'd like to mention here is that the form of vitamin D that is oftentimes tested in the form of laboratory tests is 25-hydroxy vitamin D3. Just wanted to point that out. Now, the ability to get adequate amounts of vitamin D from the sun has been questioned, not surprisingly. So it's best to get a vitamin D test to check one's vitamin D level and determine with a qualified healthcare provider if a vitamin D supplement is necessary, and if so, how much. Now, I'd like to point out here, before moving forward, that vitamin D is not just an issue for vegans and vegetarians and raw foodists. A 2018 study found that 40% of almost 5,000 participants were deficient in vitamin D, which is characterized as a blood level of less than or equal to 50 nanomoles per liter or 20 nanograms per milliliter. Now, the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey 2005 to 2006 found that 42% of the almost 4,500 respondents were deficient in vitamin D, with deficiency rates of up to 82% for some populations. Now, in recent years, vitamin D has become one of the most discussed nutrients in the health community. It is also one of the most complicated and controversial of the nutrients, especially when it comes to supplementation and plant-based diets. Now, there are two supplemental forms of vitamin D. As we can see here on the slide, there's vitamin D2, also known as ergocalciferol, and there's vitamin D3, also known as cholecalciferol. Now, ergocalciferol, or vitamin D2, has historically been thought of as the vegan form of vitamin D. On the other hand, vitamin D3, also known as cholecalciferol, has historically been considered a non-vegan form of vitamin D. Now, vitamin D2 supplements have traditionally been made from mushrooms. Exposure of ergosterol in these mushrooms to ultraviolet B spectrum rays of the sun leads to the production of vitamin D2. Now, does this mean that if we eat edible mushrooms that we'll get enough vitamin D? I would not count on it. I'm pretty skeptical. The best way to know is to get a test. Conversely, vitamin D3 supplements have been made from lanolin found in sheep's wool. Exposure of 7-dehydrocholesterol in lanolin to ultraviolet B spectrum rays of the sun leads to the formation of vitamin D3, similar to how vitamin D3 is produced in our skin. Now, research is mixed on which supplement is more reliably effective at raising our vitamin D levels. Much of this research has indicated that the vitamin D3 form of vitamin D is more effective at raising blood levels of vitamin D than vitamin D2. However, some indicates that the two can be equivalent. Many vegans have expressed concern about this, since they've found that their vitamin D2 supplements are not giving them the results that they're seeking. Consequently, some have considered using a D3 supplement to raise their vitamin D to desired levels. Now, where does this leave someone who wants to stay true to their vegan lifestyle and ethics? Fortunately, in recent years, several supplement companies have formulated supplements with vitamin D3 sourced from lichen. Now, what is lichen? That's a really good question. It's an organism composed of some type of fungus and algae, or cyanobacteria, in some cases living together symbiotically. Now, lichen is often found growing on tree branches and rocks and can have a pale green to gray or mushroom-like color, as well as others. Now, does this mean that we should eat lichen to get our vitamin D? No, because many species of lichen are not edible, so it would be best to stick with a supplement. But the good news is that a vegan vitamin D3 supplement now does exist, and various supplement companies are offering it as an alternative to lanolin-sourced vitamin D3. Now, if one is going to use a supplement, it's really important to educate oneself about the safety track record of the supplement companies that are being considered. Quality control is really important. Now, there have been cases of improperly compounded supplements causing issues for people. So what I would suggest is that, as far as your vitamin D supplement goes, use a trusted brand, one that's been around for quite some time, and one that you know that has good quality control. And if you're curious about that, you can always contact the company to find more about their quality control processes. Next, Dr. Rick is going to share with you some information about our class, Mastering Raw Food Nutrition.
Now that we've finished the educational content for this webinar, we'll move on to take a look at our Mastering Raw Food Nutrition plant-based curriculum. In today's webinar, we covered just a tiny sampling of what we have to offer in this area. So for those of you wishing to continue your education with us, you may want to consider our Mastering Raw Food Nutrition online and interactive curriculum. It's a one-year program, and the next program starts on September 1st, 2021. We recommend a time commitment of 4 to 5 hours per week. If you had 2 to 3, that would be reasonable, but if you can commit 4 to 5, that will really allow you to get the most out of the curriculum, which is what we want for all of you. So for those of you willing to put in a few hours a week for an entire year, we understand that's a big commitment. And of course, to cover the financial commitment, you can dramatically increase your chances for success, and we make the learning process fun while we're at it. First, we'll look at some of the topics that we cover in the course, and then we'll go into how it is delivered. So first of all, we have a gigantic array of topics that are covered in the curriculum. Pretty much everything important that you ever wanted to know about plant-based and raw food nutrition, based on our decades of personal research, course development, education, and clinical experience in this field. Now, we cover so much: energy healing and calorie density, basics of nutrition, blood sugar regulation. Each one of these thumbnails is about 2 hours of a segment for each week. Raw food sources and nutrients, calcium and vitamin D, vitamin B12, essential fats, acid-alkaline balance, cleansing and detoxification, not just philosophy, but real science. Where do you get your protein? Essentials of human digestion, enzymes, longevity and youth extension, where we look at long-lived people and cellular mechanisms, and we put 2 and 2 together. Health Statistics 1 and 2, the history of raw and living foods. We look at the different camps, and we understand where they're coming from, where they agree with each other, where they disagree, and why we see disagreements today. You know, it's just follows the logical chain of events. Raw 2 approaches, foundations of the raw food diet, food combining, raw food weight loss, classic studies in support of plant-based nutrition. This is a 2-week section, covers about 4 hours. We look at McDougall, PCRM, Framingham Heart Study, Ornish, Esselstyn, the China study, so much of the classic plant-based nutrition studies. Then we go on to describe that when we cook certain foods, depending on the cooking method, we actually form carcinogens, but we tell you how to avoid those even if you're not completely raw. Then Dr. Karen talks about the effects of heating on food from a nutrient perspective. We look at organic versus non-organic. Now, please keep in mind that anyone can come up with a list of topics that sounds impressive, but the question is, how much experience do they have in these areas, and how much experience do they have educating others? We have an awful lot of that. So some other topics we cover. Grains and plant families. Dr. Karen mentioned that her second undergrad degree was in molecular biology, and she studied all this stuff about plant families. And when we look at grains and different plant foods, that actually helps to explain why certain plant foods are rich in certain nutrients depending on which family they are in. Making sense of food labels, psychological factors of health and healing, candida, DHA, xenoestrogens, and phytoestrogens, water fasting and juice fasting, where we get some of my clinical experience from True North involved. A survey of superfoods and supplements. Dr. Karen looks at the real peer-reviewed research literature and compares that with the marketing claims of various superfoods, and we sort of learn who's naughty and who's nice, who's telling the truth and who's making exaggerated claims, so you can have the information to make excellent decisions. Raw food sources of nutrients expanded, raw food exaggerations. The history of human food choices. Did meat get our big brains? Was it starches? Was it fruit? Dr. Karen examines the literature of those competing theories and gives a fair assessment. The big question of animal products, do we need them? The importance of sleep, that and psychological factors and the autonomic nervous system that you'll see in the next slide are 3 of our not directly nutritionally related topics, but they operate together with, and sometimes nutrition happens underneath their umbrella. So some other important things to look at to round out the entire picture. Menu planning for various health challenges, expanded view of carbohydrates, more about weight loss. Sweeteners. We don't recommend sweeteners, but some people like to make a few fancy things. It's good to know what's going on so you can make the best choices about what to put in your recipes. Importance of hydration, research and support of raw food nutrition. This is another 2-week section where we study what's going on and understand things to help us make sense. Nutrient analyses of various plant foods, and then the next week, various sample diets really starts to put things together to see what type of dietary approaches are the most complete and which ones just make claims but don't really add up. So we look at a standard modern diet, we look at a paleo diet, we look at a starch-centered plant-based diet, we look at a couple of different raw food diets, and we really see what's going on. Then we take that model and specifically look at the fatty acid profile, first of different foods, then of different diets, with special emphasis on omega-3 conversion, including many case histories of long-term plant-based eaters, including many raw foodists who have been my patients over the years who I have studied. So that's part of where my clinical practice and experience makes its way into the curriculum. We have some more. Survey of superfoods. Let me let those come out one at a time. More superfoods and supplements. An overview of energy. Gosh, that's where Dr. Karen looks at all the pathways of where carbohydrates and fat and protein can go. But translates it into English so it all makes sense. Sea vegetables. Advanced, what we call advanced functions of dietary fiber that leads into probiotics and prebiotics, so you will have an extremely solid foundation to speak with anybody with authority about probiotics and the human microbiome. The pleasure trap, the work of doctors Doug Lisle and Alan Goldhammer, so critically important. As I mentioned earlier, the autonomic nervous system, and then overcoming challenges and pitfalls in plant-based and raw food nutrition. This actually covers about a week and a half. At this point, we are done with our third out of our fourth notebook, and this is an overview section that also brings some new information into play and takes a look at where people can go wrong, where they can make mistakes, and why that causes them to no longer be vegan anymore. More than once it's happened that during this section and during some other sections of the class, our students have been looking on YouTube and seeing who's defecting from the plant-based movement, and they're like, oh my God, if they had only taken this class and understood this, they could stay in the movement instead of leaving it. It just brings a lot together. And then we start on our educator material. And about 20% of our students wish to go on and educate others. About 10% are already doing so and want to refine and learn more and have more confidence and be able to help people more effectively and answer their questions more effectively so they have more confidence in them. And the other 10% are on their path doing that, starting out by getting educated with us first and then going on. So for the other 80%, we haven't forgotten about those students. A lot of this material comes in so handy when your friends and your family members and your coworkers are asking you questions about your diet. We have several weeks where we just practice answering hundreds of different questions that you might get asked about these things and how to handle those with grace and elegance rather than being on the defensive and being antagonistic about things. And that aspect of plant-based eating, being different from the rest of the world, when you can navigate the unhealthy world successfully, that helps us be healthier. That helps us have more confidence in interacting with other people. And so that really near the end there ties a whole bunch of things together. Dr. Karen talks about how to continue to research on your own after the course is over, tips and tricks that she learned as a research assistant and she's been doing on her own for 15 or so years now. Things like putting this class together. And then we finish off with seeing the big picture of health and the raw health continuum. So by the time our students complete this course, their level of understanding and confidence in a whole food plant-based diet with a foundation of raw fruits and vegetables is at an extremely high level. Over and over again, they tell us how much they appreciate our thorough and unbiased approach. And our position is all you have to do is tell the truth, and the benefits of plant-based nutrition are naturally revealed. No outrageous claims, nothing crazy, just amazing health supporting results. So before going on, I just wanted to share one quick case history from a student of ours in our 2019-2020 class. And she says, "Hi, I'm Danny, and I love the Mastering Raw Food Nutrition course. I have learned so much about the benefits of raw and living food that has improved my own knowledge of nutrition, and I've been able to help others now as well. I have a solid foundation of nutrition now to bring into my traditional medical practice." Danny actually has several advanced nursing degrees. "The program definitely over-delivers content and brings up subjects that I didn't even think of, but truly found interesting. Thank you, Dr. Rick and Dr. Karen, for taking the time to put all of this together in a way that makes sense and makes it totally applicable to implement right away." So we're always honored to hear things like this. We love having other healthcare providers in class with us. Typically about 10% of our students are healthcare providers, and some even have advanced degrees like medical doctors and people with PhDs, several nurses, some of our chiropractic and naturopathic colleagues, etc. So how do we deliver this to get students to that point? So first of all, there are about 2 hours per week of professional quality videos, similar to what you're seeing here on this webinar. Now you can watch these videos at your own schedule. They're available 24/7 as long as you're connected to the internet. Once they are released each week, they stay there for the rest of the course, so you can always review, and you can watch them as many times as you want. They are 2 hours is typically broken down into maybe 4 or 5, 20 or 30-minute segments, so you can chunk things down accordingly and fit them into your schedule. Now, every hour that our students see, and including what you see in the educational part of this webinar, typically takes us a full-time week to put together, even with our background and experience, to read a bunch of research, to put it all together, to make sense out of everything, to make charts and graphs and figure out how to deliver it in a way that's understandable is a huge amount of effort. You can save yourself years and decades of time by utilizing what we have to offer, so we make extremely efficient use of your time. Now, also, we just recently added a couple of years ago the audio version of those weekly videos. So you can listen to those on your own schedule, same things as many times as you want. And oftentimes when people are driving or exercising or multitasking, you want to bring your phone with you. You don't have necessarily a laptop, or you can't see everything on a phone screen anyway, although most of them are pretty high resolution that day. You can still do pretty well. But if you want to make it easier and just listen and save a lot of mobile data, we have the audio MP3s available as well. Now, along with the videos, we have very comprehensive notebooks. We have 4 of those that we send you throughout the year. It's about 900 pages worth of notes, and there are thousands of scientific references in the back that we used in order to put this curriculum together. Now, what these notes are not is they are not transcripts. We know a lot of people with online courses just say, oh yeah, we've got notes for you. They have some software, make a transcript, and everything you said is written out in paragraph form. I remember seeing those once, and it said, I need some water, because they were clearing their throat and they didn't edit that out. That's not what these notes are. These are in charts and graphs and bullet points to lay everything out logically, to complement what you see in the educational videos, so you don't have to distract your focus trying to write everything down. You can pay attention to what you're seeing on the screen, and you may want to write a few other things in your notes or hit pause every now and then, but for the most part, those notes are there and they really help enhance the learning process. They are also lifetime reference material. So years after the course is over, you have all of this information available at your fingertips. We're going to take a quick look at some of the pages. So here we have some tables and some various things. It doesn't say proof and have our watermark behind it in the actual notes. We have some, you can see the charts and everything else. Here's some other information. You see all the graphics, and there's some information about protein, for example. Now, what we also do is if we can see here, if I'm lined up, we print the name of the course on the spine of these. So when you've got them lined up in your notebook, they are all ready to go. Once again, a lifetime of reference material at your fingertips. Okay, so then we have weekly quizzes that are interactive. So after you go through the videos for that week, you can take a 5-question typically quiz. You answer, and then it tells you if you're right or wrong, and then it gives you an explanation of what's going on with that question to help enhance the learning process. Then once you're done with all that, it gives you all 5 questions and the explanations. Takes about 10 minutes or so to go through that. You can retake it as many times as you want. We just implemented that for our current year's class, and thus far it looks like it's going really well because our students are taking advantage of that, again, to enhance the learning process. Now, all of that thus far is on your own, but we don't leave you hanging. 6 to 8 times per month, we have live video conferences. They're on Tuesdays at 2 different times. You can see the times here. So no matter where you are in the world and what type of schedule you have, it's likely that one of these times will work for you. So when there are 3 Tuesdays per month, which is typical, there's 6 conferences, occasionally there's 4, and then there's 8 conferences. So with those, you come on video conferences, you interact. If it's my topic for that week, you'll be interacting with me live. If it's Dr. Karen's, you'll be interacting with her. Sometimes we are both there. So you can raise your hand visually or by hitting the raise hand icon and ask us questions directly, or you can type questions in either during the call in the chat, or if these times don't work either all the time or occasionally, you can always type your questions in advance of the call. We've got it very easy. We've got it set up so it's very easy to do that. And then what we do is we go back and forth between questions written in and live questions on those conferences, and we audio record each of them and save them back to the course site so you can always go listen to the recording and then hear the answers to your questions, as well as the questions and our answers from your fellow students. So that's very, very handy. Also, for the first 4 years teaching this class online, we had a Facebook group. This current year and continuing on, we now actually have private groups within the course. So there are no privacy issues, there's no ads, there's no things that you don't want to see in there. And we've actually broken it down into a social group where you can get to know your fellow students, you can post recipes, you can talk about how the holidays went and the challenges with some of your relatives, or some success stories of eating healthfully, you're off your medication, your A1C's down, whatever the case may be. And then we also have a separate study group. And in the study group, typically, sometimes we'll get a really good question on our live conferences, and we will sometimes look up some articles and give some links and then put those in the study group to help enhance answering students' questions and making sense out of everything. A couple of our quotes from recent students. Susan from California says, "This class is incredibly beneficial and beautifully taught." Sam from New York says, "I have taken many courses in plant-based nutrition and hold certifications from many different health institutions. However, there is none that I hold in higher regard than the one I will receive from Mastering Raw Food Nutrition. It is the most detailed, scientific, and complete program from any I have taken. From all the courses I have taken, this is the one I recommend for serious nutrition enthusiasts." Now, one of those courses that Sam took was the plant-based nutrition course from eCornell, which we also hold in very high esteem. And what Sam has said is typical of many eCornell graduates who have joined us. They said they loved eCornell, they loved the scientific rigor and the validity and the solidness and credibility of everything in that course. And then, we tell them, we're very much the same way in how we teach, and that if they want to learn more topics and have an emphasis on fruits and vegetables and go into more depth and detail, that we are the logical next step. So we're honored when eCornell graduates join us to continue their learning process. And Sam and his family are up to some really cool stuff about healthy eating and sustainable living and teaching other people how to do that in upstate New York. So it is a true honor when people like him join us to help enhance them on their journeys, making the world a better place. A couple of things about exposure versus cohesion. Dr. Karen has about 3/4 or so of a naturopathic medical degree. She finished a chiropractic school. She did just a summer preceptorship at True North. I was there for 4 years. So we bring different things to the table, but at the same time, we think of things in a very similar way, and we are a married couple, both who have doctorate degrees, so there's a great amount of cohesiveness to the information as well. So this isn't one of these courses where we just have, this person talk about this talk about this. In a way, that's good because they each have expertise in one area, but we have a very broad perspective on all this, and in many areas, we also have a lot of depth. So we're really able to put everything together in a cohesive whole. There's a lot of synergy, and it's a real winning combination. And we're total nerds, so it's fun for us, and I think that comes across to a lot of our students. So before we wrap up and summarize how the course works, a couple of other testimonials from our students. Tim in Tennessee says, I've learned a tremendous amount from this course, and it revolutionized my eating life. The science was detailed, fascinating, and life-changing. Though I am not 100% raw yet, he says, I have moved far in that direction based on what I learned. Plus now I have the least damaging ways to cook foods and have completely converted to using only those approaches when I do cook. The video lessons were all fun and informative, and the conferences warm and immensely helpful. I learned a ton from the other students as well. I am so glad I took this course. He said in another part of our survey, great course, so useful and life-changing, loved the depth of science. And Tim was one of those students. He was there at every conference asking excellent questions, was really into it, and we can see how much of a difference it makes. Like any other endeavor, the more you put in, the more you get out. And like with Sam and our other students, are just honored to have been able to share that with Tim and make a real difference in his life. And by the way, we have so many good testimonials that if you go to our website, rawfoodeducation.com, and click on the testimonials, even though we'd love to put them all in here in the interest of time, we're just putting a few of them in there, but you can read a lot more there. The last one we'll share in this webinar here is from Annette in the UK. And she said, I had high expectations of this course when I started, as I took the course with my husband, had already seen some of the work of Drs. Rick and Karen, and I have to say, my high expectations have been well and truly exceeded. Many other online courses feel anonymous with a sense of distance from the course provider. This is far from the case with Mastering Raw Food Nutrition. Drs. Rick and Karen get to know their students despite the physical distance. They are responsive, interested, and approachable. And by the way, when Annette and her husband took the course, we didn't even have live video conferencing yet. We were on more of a conference call where everyone could hear us and we could hear them, but there wasn't the visual, so it's even better now. She goes on to say, this is the best study decision I have taken since studying for my degree in the 1980s. That one had a profound impact on my future, and this one is highly likely to do the same. There is rigor and depth to this course, all of which is conveyed in such a way that a non-scientist such as me is able to understand it and assimilate it for later use. For anyone interested in really learning about plant-based nutrition, I can recommend this course unreservedly. And we really do go out of our way to have scientific rigor, but to translate it into English as well to make sure that you understand it. That's the goal, because then you're empowered to go out and make a difference in your life. So to summarize here, we have 2 hours worth of professional video educational videos per week, as well as the audio-only versions for those of you who are so inclined. We have thoughtfully designed notebooks to go along with each subject and that cover the whole course, lifetime reference material there. We have those weekly interactive quizzes We have near weekly live video conference every Tuesday except the last Tuesday of the month, and we have private social and study groups, and all of it is designed to give you the knowledge and confidence to keep on track and make the best decisions to give you a lifetime of supercharged health. We want to thank you so much for joining us today.
We'll be sending you an email shortly where we invite those of you really excited about the course to speak with us to help determine if mastering raw food nutrition is a good fit for you. You can also click on the schedule link that's on your screen right now. Now we're going to take a 5-minute intermission, and then we'll be back to answer questions about the course and plant-based and raw food nutrition. In the meantime, please feel free to sign up for a time to speak with us. We look forward to speaking with you soon.